this is our last in our series of Lunch and Learns. And the intention of my series so far was kind of culminating in Giving Tuesday. And so I was trying to think what this last session should be. And so I wanted to kind of drill down on queries and lists. And I know as we're approaching the end of the calendar year, we have maybe tasked with doing a lot more, or a lot of our yearly kind of end of year lists and stuff. So I figured this queries and lists would be a good place to get started. Our last session. But as you'll see here in a second, that we are going to continue this in the new year. There we go. Here's our agenda for today. This is let me move this out of the way. So this is my introduction. I'm trying to put my video place in a good spot. Anyway, so if this is your first session with us, this is my background. Married, I've got four girls. We can see our picture there. And I've been a Razor's Edge client for the last 15 years, and been a consultant independently kind of for the last 12 or 13 years. And then I joined NPACT back in February. I've been a full-time Razor's Edge consultant. And so what I say I like to do is I help organizations achieve their mission. Would like to knock down roadblocks that stand between, kind of Razor's Edge and then what you guys are trying to do. So that it could look like training, it could look like doing data cleanup, report writing, and all things in between. And my fun fact I just mentioned a minute ago that I'm going to be back in January. We're going to kick this series off again in the new year. Yeah, so I'll send out the registration link after we get back from the holidays, and would love to see you guys back again. And then I'll kind of have a rundown of what the topics are going to be next year as well. So I hope have found these kind of beneficial, and you've taken a small thing from each session that you've learned and taken it and been able to apply it in your day-to-day work. So here's what the past sessions have looked like. And again, I have the link there. I'll send this out either later today or tomorrow, once today's recording gets updated. But there's the link, npact.com. No, that's backwards. It should be vimeo.com/npact. I can't believe I didn't catch that. Vimeo.com/npact. And the top half is our Financial Edge videos, and the bottom half are Razor's Edge. You got to scroll down a little bit to get to our RE sessions. So we'll talk about queries. And a lot of our sessions so far have just been in database view, but we're going to be kind of half and half in database view and talk about queries, and then in web view and talk about lists. So what do we use queries for, or why do we use queries in lists? And the scene I like to set is, imagine that all of your records are in a field. So I usually like to say, imagine they're like sheep in a field. So imagine every single record in your database is a sheep in a field. What we use queries and lists for is to group those sheep together. We put a fence around those sheep out in your field. So we're not using it to get information out of the database. We're just using it to group these records together. So when we go to create a new query in database view, we have to pick what type of query it is. So we have different record types in our database. We have constituents, we have appeals, we have gifts, we have campaigns. So when we're creating this query or list, we're grouping together these record types. Okay. So in database view, how are queries used? Or when are we going to use them? So we're using them to make global changes. So on the kind of the admin side of your database, when you want to make a global change to a lot of records at the same time, you start with a query. And so you can make those global changes on that group of records. And kind of more simply, or what's used a lot more popularly, is we're using queries to run reports and to get exports. So I said we use queries to group our records together. We then use exports to get that information out about all of those records.
Well, I ran the total
that are grouped together. Where's my mouse? Okay. So what else do we use queries for in database view? We can use those for communication in Online Express. So in order to make a mailing list in Online Express, we're going to start with a query, and we can use that query to make the mailing list. The other thing that we can use and create queries for is output queries. And let me jump into the database view, and I'll show you what I mean by output queries. So when we're making a report, and we can pick any kind of report we're looking at. So a really popular one is a gift detail and summary report. So when we're doing a new gift detail and summary report, we're asking, so we can start with a query here. So that's a place that we can put a query, is we can start here, and this can be a constituent or a gift query for this particular report. So we could start with a query, but let's say we don't want to, and let's say we want to report on giving for this month. And then we can apply, certain filters for, giving for this month for a specific fund or a specific set of funds or a query of funds. So we can use it there as well. So we run this report. We want to get some giving information about giving for this month. One option we have is to make an output query. And for this particular report, we can make a gift output query or a constituent output query. So how we use that is we're asking Raiser's Edge to report on some information based on our filters. And while the report is being ran, we can also ask it to then make a constituent query. So all of the donors that have a gift this month, when we run this query, when we run this report, we can save an output query from this report, and we can make a constituent query, or we can have a group of constituent records that meet this report. So for example, if we wanted, and we're kind of stacking all these ideas on top of each other. So let's say we wanted to send an email through Online Express to all of the donors that made a gift to a specific fund last month. Okay, that could be a problem, or that could be a job that we're tasked with. We want to send an email to everyone that gave last month to a specific fund. So we can come into a gift detail report and say, we're going to look at all the records, but we want to look at all the records that gave last month to a specific fund. I don't know. Oh, there's the Kevin Wood Family Fund. This is our test database. So I don't know what gifts have gift activity from last month. We're just going to bring them all over. So, but when we generate this report, we're asking it to make a constituent query. So when we preview this, it's going to ask us to save the query in a second. Yeah, so it's going to ask us to save the query. So this is all giving last month. Okay, all donors from last month. And when we save it and run it, and hopefully there's some gifts that meet this criteria. Yeah, so we've got a few here. So we now have a constituent query that it only has 2 donors in it, but we have a constituent query now saved with these 2 donors that met the criteria of the report. We can then take that query. So it lives over here in query. We can take that query to Online Express, which we can take that query to Online Express and now make a mailing list from that query. So we're kind of just building on top of all the ideas we've talked about so far. But just by simply making that output query from the report, we can then use it in other places. Okay. So let's jump back into here. Okay, so that's what we can do with queries in database view. Before we go back into that image, let me go back into database view. And originally, when I had made this class, I said we were going to be doing complex queries. What that means when I say complex queries, we have these other options over here to merge. And if you've never kind of merged queries before, all this is the way that I think about it is just that we're building a math problem. So when we merge queries, you think about a math problem, we think about 4 plus 5. So the 4 in this situation, the 4 is the primary query, the 5 is the secondary query, and then the answer is the end result of what we're going to put together here. So we have an operator. We've got a lot of operators here. We've got and, we've got or, we've got subtract, and we've got XOR. And I'll kind of just go through, I'll kind of talk through what these operators are. And then I showed you, I had the image up on my screen for a second, but then I'm going to show you a kind of a picture to remember about what all these means. So if we use the operator and, this is going to produce a query that has every record in the primary and every record in the secondary. So if we think about it, it's just all the records that fall into both of the queries at the same time. Okay. I think this will make a little bit more sense when I show you the picture, but I want to talk through it first. So and is every single record that is in both of the queries all together. No, I just confused myself. And is in, I said it right, but I said it right the first time. And is in all the records that are fit in both queries. So it's records that are in both queries. Okay, let me show you the picture. This might make a little bit more sense. Here. So and these are all Venn diagrams. So and are the records that fit into both queries. Okay. So it's that intersection point where if a record is in the first query and the second query, they're going to show up in the merged query. Okay, so that's and. Or is when they're in both queries, or it's all of them all together at once. So it's all the records in the first query and all the records in the second query. That end result is going to give you your final result when you use or. Okay. So XOR is another option, and that's records that are in either query but not both. So hopefully this picture helps a little bit. It's in either query but not both queries. So it's the orange where we see the orange is what's going to be in the final product. Now, what I use a lot and probably the most when I'm merging queries, and that it's not even in this picture, is sub. So when we subtract. So this is when we use sub, this is give me everyone that's in this first query and take out everyone that's in the second query. So and I'll give you a practical example of when I use this. So if I'm producing a mailing list, and so let's say our mailing list is all of our donors from last fiscal year. So we can make a query that says gift date equals last fiscal year, something simple like that. But if we're doing a mailing list, we want to make sure we take out dead people, and we want to take out people that have do not solicit as a solicit code on their record. So we can make another query that says solicit code equals do not solicit or deceased equals yes. Okay. Then for the primary query, we're going to put in all of last fiscal year donors. For our secondary query, we're going to put in the do not solicits, and we're going to subtract out the do not solicits out of our last fiscal year donors. So that to me, that makes a little bit more sense as a math problem. So we have our last fiscal year donors as primary. We have the do not solicits as secondary, and we're going to take them out of that primary query. Does that make sense? So those are when I think of complex queries, that's kind of what I'm thinking of. We're kind of piecing together that math problem. I will send this. This video will be uploaded to our Vimeo channel, but I'll try to remember to attach this picture to the email I send out to you guys. This is always kind of surfaces in the RE user group on Facebook around this time, around Thanksgiving and Halloween, because of the pumpkins. I always think this is kind of funny, but it is a good visual representation of how to use the operators in query. Okay. So let me give you another practical example of how we can build a query in Raiser's Edge. So imagine we put together an export that we're going to give to our executive director. And in the export, we have constituent ID, first name, last name, maybe some giving history, maybe some action information, and you give it to your executive director to kind of review. And your executive director has no knowledge of Raiser's Edge, and he or she might go through that list and start deleting rows. So we've started with a query that we exported information on. It's now static information because it's in Excel. Give it to your executive director, and they start deleting rows out of that spreadsheet. So maybe we have a list of 2,000 or 5,000 rows of data in Excel, they start just picking out rows and deleting them. And maybe they delete 500 rows out of that list. And they send it back to you and say, okay, the people that I sent back to you, I want to send them an email, or I want to send them an email. So we want to do that in Online Express. So take this list and send an email, from me. How do we do that? How do we get that information back into Raiser's Edge and in a manageable format, or in a way that we can make a query out of it and then send it to Online Express? All right. So let me, I have a list of constituent IDs here. And these are just all the constituent IDs that are in our test environment. So there's two different ways of making this list of constituent IDs into a query. If we have, let's say that list your executive director sends back to you has 500 or less rows. So let's say it's just, let's just imagine it's the first 100 of these. We'll just go down and let's just grab 100 of these constituent IDs. Now, one way of doing this would be to, one way of doing this would be to just go open a new query and do constituent ID one of, and just start typing. That is going to take you forever to do. We don't want to do that. What we can also do is we can copy these constituent IDs in Excel. So I just, like I said, I grabbed the first 100, but up to 500, you can do this. So I went in, I just copied the first 100, and now let's go take it into a query. So in the same manner, we're going to set a new query. We're going to do a constituent query. And one of the fields we can look at is constituent ID. Now, before I said you could do one of and just start typing constituent IDs. It's going to take you forever. You got to have Excel open on one screen. You got to have this open. You're doing you're punching in numbers. You make a mistake, whatever. What we can also do is I have those IDs copied onto my clipboard, onto my computer. I can open up this screen, do constituent ID one of, and I can scroll all the way to the bottom and put my cursor right here. Now you're not going to see anything, but I'm going to click in this last box, and I clicked into that very last box in that list. Now I'm just going to do Control V. Again, we still don't see anything, but if I hit OK, we now have all of these constituent IDs in the query. So it's one of, and every single, and I think maybe, like I said, only 100, but there are all of those constituent IDs. I hit results, and I did 95 of them. So there's the 95 records that I highlighted in Excel. And so now I have these people saved in a query. I can save this query, take it to Online Express, and do it. We can run reports on it, whatever we need to do. But now we've done a really quick and easy way of getting a list of constituent IDs out of Excel and into database view. The other way to do it is through import, and I'm not going to have time to show you how to do that. But if we have more than 500, so we've got like maybe a couple thousand here, or maybe just 1,000. The other way to do that is through import, and we can save this list as a CSV file, take it to import, and create an output query from our import. I'm not going to go through that because I want to make sure I get into the WebView stuff as well. But just know there is another way. When we have more than 500, we can use import as a way to save this list as a query. If you want to know how to do that, shoot me an email, and I think I may have already created a video on it, but I can send it to you, or we can set up time and I can show you. So now let's jump into WebView and start talking about lists a little bit. So the how to decide when you want to make a list in WebView or a query in database view kind of decides on the filters you're looking at using. The filters that we have available for us to use in WebView are a lot smaller. We have a lot less filters in WebView than we do in database view, which is fine. I imagine functionality is slowly moving from database view to WebView. So I imagine that we'll start getting more functionality and more filters that we can use in WebView. But if let's say our organization only does email communication through WebView, then we have to use lists in WebView in order to use email in WebView. So that's one of the reasons. The other thing that I wanted to show you that only exists in WebView, this functionality doesn't exist in database view, is when we want to do an address radius. Now, for some organizations, all of your constituents are in, maybe you're in your county or in your zip code, and this isn't a lot of benefit. But imagine we're at a big university, or maybe even just at a high school, and we have alums or we have constituents all over the country, and we're deciding on wanting to do a regional alumni event in some other city. How do we capture those people that live in that area? Well, we can do that in WebView. So one of the filters that we can bring over is address radius. So I went and did a new constituent list. And in order to bring over filters to use, we have to hit this filter icon here. And these are all of the filters we have available for us to use in WebView. We also have this location here, and one of the location filters is called address radius. And when we bring that over, we now have the ability to filter on address radius. So what we can do is we can define a location anywhere in the world, but let's look at, I don't know where my constituents are in my test environment, but let's just say Chicago, Illinois. And let's say we want to do, we're going to do an event in Chicago, and we want to get all of our constituents that are in a 50-mile radius of Chicago. So we can do that. And like I said, I don't know if this is going to bring back any. Okay, we've got 7 constituents in our test environment that live in a 50-mile radius of Chicago. So now we're able to take this list fairly quickly and get an invite list for our event that we're going to do in Chicago, or maybe we're sending out communication or what have you. But we can now save this list. We can save this list as 50-mile radius of Chicago. And so now we have this list saved. We can take it to email and send our invitation out as an email fairly straightforward and fairly quickly. So, this is very helpful. One of the things I really like about WebView lists is this radius option. For my line of work, most of the time I'm doing queries in database view, but there are certain things that you're only able to do in WebView, and this is one of them. So that's like when you kind of have to tell the difference between the two. But let's say you have a query that you built in database view. So like I said, there's certain things that you have to do in database view as well. If we do a new query in database view but make it static instead of dynamic. So, let's say we're looking at, whatever the scenario is, where it's constituent code equals, is whatever. We're putting a query together in WebView or in database view. And let's have results. Okay, we've got 60 people here. Okay, so we can save this as a static query in database view, and we'll call this our list test. Okay, we put all of our keys on our records, and we have this static query saved to have 68 people. And now we want to go send them again. We do our communication through WebView, so now we want to turn this static query in database view into a list in WebView. So we've saved it here, and let's jump back into WebView. We're going to make a new query. We have the option of starting with a static query. So fairly easily, we can move our list and our queries from WebView to database view and back and forth kind of fairly easy. So let's, what I call this list test. There it is right there. So here's the query I just saved a minute ago in database view. It's available for us to use in WebView, and we can open it up. And now here's those 68 people or 65. This is, maybe I've included dead people or something, but here's this list now in WebView. And just the same, we can go back and forth. So when, let's say we have this list in WebView that we want to now do something to in database view, we can save it as a static query or even a query list in database view. So we can kind of go back and forth between the two systems with our queries and lists. Okay, let me go back to my PowerPoint to see what I've forgotten about that I wanted to talk about. So back in WebView, we have the option of doing a workflow, and that workflows for the most part start with a query as well. This may be a topic that I'd like talking about workflows, and maybe we might drill down on this as a topic in 2023. But when we create a workflow, they all, let me open one I've already done. They all start with a query. I'm sorry, start with a list. So when we are creating a workflow is something where an action can happen based off of a trigger. So for example, let's say we have a list that says birthday equals this week or birthday equals this month. And so that is always going to kind of always update as we move throughout the year. So we could create a list that I'm going to make it later, but we start with a list that says birthday equals this month. And so that's the trigger that produces the action. And the action is that we send our constituents an email that says happy birthday from the Humane Society. We can create that workflow to happen automatically, and it kind of happens in the background. And so we're having communication with our constituents that is kind of like was the old food dehydrator. You set it and forget it. You make the workflow, you have it update automatically with people that have birthdays that are equal to this month. And when they make it into the list, it sends them an email. So that's kind of workflows in a nutshell. But what I was going to talk about is that it starts with a list. And so that's another area in WebView that we would use lists, is in workflows. Are there any questions? I know I've been zooming through this very quickly. It seems like our 30 minutes always goes by very quickly. So are there any questions? You can put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask.
Kevin, this is Trisha. I have a question.
Yes.
So I've been doing a lot of queries lately for some mailing lists.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have found, I'm in database view and trying to drill down. What's the rule of thumb, like how far you can really drill down in those queries without getting distorted information?
What do you mean when you say drill down?
Well, I think I have too many variables, I guess, yep, in there. What's the rule of thumb for, like, you should only put, 3 things in there as your criteria and then export it and drill it down from there?
Yeah. So I've seen queries that have lots of lines of filters here. So I don't know if there's probably a limit where it gets bogged down too much, but what usually happens in the situation where we have a lot of filters in a query is that we're not managing our ands and ors and parentheses in a good manner. So the rule of thumb is, whenever you have an and an or, so if you have an and an or in a query filter, you have to use parentheses. If you have an and an or, so let's just do for an example here. So if you have an and an or, so let's do that and this. So that's an and. So this is fine. This is perfectly fine to have. We just have, this is everyone that has a constituent code of acknowledgee and that has a solicit code of do not call after 9 p.m. But let's say we also then throw in gift date equals whatever. Gift date equals this month. And we say or. So in this situation, Razor's Edge doesn't know how to understand what you're asking it to do. So we have an and an or in here. And so are you saying you want your constituent code equals acknowledgee, and they also say have that code of do not call after 9? Or you have the constituent code or the gift date equals this month? Whenever there's a combination of ands and ors, we have to have some parentheses. So we can have the parentheses here like this. You always have to have an open and a close. So you can have it like this. So what this is saying, that everyone that has the constituent code of acknowledgee and the solicit code of do not call after 9 p.m., all of those people are going to be included. Or anyone in your database that has a gift date equal to this month is going to be included as well. So that's kind of the rule of thumb, is that when you have both and or, you need parentheses. Now, and maybe to answer your question a little bit more specifically, Like I said, I've seen queries that have 15 or 20 rows of filters in here and it still work correctly. And maybe they're all ands, maybe they're all ors, or maybe we're just doing a good job of managing our parentheses. But you want to be careful. And so like, maybe we want to go towards a query list or maybe merging queries together to like, keep it more straight in our mind, how we're building our list. So we can always, merge together two queries. What we also want to stay away from is if you have a merged query. So let's say we have two queries that are merged together. We don't want to then take that query and put it into another merged math problem. We're going to get Razor's Edge has a little bit of difficulty when we're doing that as well. I don't really know the reason why, but I always just like to stay away from putting merged queries into then new merge, taking them to merge with another query. So we either try to want to put it all in one or try to keep it into just two queries that we're going to then merge together. Well, thank you. I hope this, let me jump back into my thing. I think I have some closing slides here. Yeah, so join us in January. We're going to start a new series. I'll send out those, the registration link and the topics, probably the first of the year. We'll kind of shoot for the fourth Thursday again of every fourth Thursday of every month again. That seemed to work out. And then if you have any questions or any topics that you'd like me to talk about, I can certainly weave those into my new series next year. Here's my contact information. I also included my link, which this is in my email signature. If you want to book time to do an introductory call to see if our consulting services might fit into some needs that your organization might have, please don't hesitate to schedule a 15-minute meeting on my calendar. Also, for the people that have been with me for this 6-month series, also you can schedule a 15-minute meeting. I'll do a free, deep dive. If you have a specific question, we can be live in your database, and you can schedule a 15-minute call with me. And if you have like just a specific question, like, hey, I need some help on this topic or this specific thing, I'm trying to produce this report or this list, feel free to schedule a 15-minute call with me and I can try to help out.